I'm AJ Hem. I am back with a new review, a little movie review, and it has A Quiet Place Part 2. I have seen the first one multiple times. I gave that 4 stars and 80% on my Letterboxd if you want to check out the review. Yes, it is in Morse code just because I thought it'd be funny at that time to type it out in that, and honestly I still think it's funny. This is the first new movie that got me back to theaters. Technically, it was the Shrek 20th anniversary, but that I don't count that since that was a movie I grew up on, and that was more of a enjoyment with me and my siblings / cousins. But I am here to talk about Quiet Place Part 2, and I want to do my system where I talk about each element. I don't know if I did that in my previous reviews. Either I forgot to or some. Actually, it's more likely that I forgot. So I'm going to try to do it here. With that in mind, let's talk about the movie. Of course, I am in love with the literary design because it makes me remember the sequel compared to the first movie. Don't get me wrong. The first movie had a great introduction to the concept, but this movie really emphasizes on what happened after the first movie and even the impact the monsters have left on the world. It gave me a lot of Last of Us vibes, especially with some of the cast members and their characters, but I will get to them in a bit. I do kind of like that we don't really know where these monsters came from, only that they fell out of the sky, and that they basically killed humankind, and only a few people are surviving. I mean, I don't know if we're gonna get more answers in future movies or future projects. Either way, I'm happy to be blissfully unaware. As for the cast, I was expecting Emily Blunt to be the star of the movie, but really it is Millicent Simmons, who has become one of my favorite young actresses now, because I love how this movie focuses on her now. Just that she has this guilt, this weight on her shoulders that her father died saving their family. And now she just goes on through this journey knowing she's willing to do anything to save them, just like her dad. And some of the characters point that out, like she's just like her father. And you really feel for her. I just love the authenticity this actress brings to Reagan. Same thing with Noah Jupe as Marcus. He makes some mistakes, but they're understandable. He thought he was doing the right thing, and he's running on fear and adrenaline. He's a young boy, and you just really feel for him. When he did something wrong, I was like, Marcus, no, but at the same time, I understood why he did it. And I'm like, to be fair, I may have to do that because I have terrible anxiety. Maybe I would have done the same thing. And Emily Blunt, she did really good. Again, while I did prefer Millicent and Noah's screen time, she still killed it playing Lee's wife, Emily, having to protect her children, especially a newborn baby. That must be stressful and a lot to bear. And then for Cillian Murphy, this is I'd say the first movie that made me realize, like, I've seen more of him. I've seen him in The Dark Knight, Inception, etc. But this one made me realize I should really rewatch this movie or look more into his filmography because he's a good actor. And then visual design. I saw that Scott Farrar returned from Part 1, and he has done visuals for Back to the Future Part 3 and Narnia. Those are like only the few movies I could recognize. As the visuals on the monsters, while they did give me Stranger Things vibes literally the whole time, I was just like, this is literally a Demogorgon. What I like is that it was also giving me Last of Us vibes because of the noises these monsters were making. As soon as I heard them, I'm like, I am getting straight up flashbacks from clickers from Last of Us. Ironically, I have not played the game, but I was playing with my best friend. And when we were at the hospital scene in the game, as soon as we heard the clickers, we screamed. So that's what I kind of like about the monster design. It's like it's kind of familiar, but at the same time, these are creatively designed monsters. You see in their facial structures that they are physically relying on sound through their I think it was the side of their face or the front, and it both weirded me out and kind of impressed me. Alright, cinematography. I did have to look this up because in the first movie, the cinematography was done by Charlotte Bruce Christensen. I apologize if I butchered the name, but now we have Polly Morgan. The cinematography, it is possibly my second or first favorite element of this movie because I am repeating myself when I say I got Last of Us vibes from this, but that's because the shots are so natural, and so grand despite its setting, which is like Earth has been taken over by these monsters, so nobody's taking care of it, and that nature is overrunning some of the backgrounds. You just see vines and grass everywhere, and I like that the cinematography emphasized that. I watched a interview recently of someone talking to Polly Morgan. I will leave a link in the description. I recommend watching it because I loved hearing her perspective and stories and answering the questions about her experience filming this movie. I hope she gets to be able to do more work, and I'll have to look into her filmography, her credits as the photographer, because I really like her style and how she tried to keep in mind Christensen's previous work on the first film. And what really blends in well with the cinematography is the editing. This whole time, you are in the edge of your seat because of how well the cinematography and editing blends well together to give that suspenseful mood. You are following these characters in this world where if you make a sound, you are most likely going to die. And I really like that it gives this sense of claustrophobia with the characters. You are always on edge. You are thinking like any moment now, something will go wrong, something will make a sound, and a monster is going to pop out somewhere. My ears are sensitive when it comes to jump scares, and I mean when I'm in the theaters. So when I sense a jump scare coming, I will cover my ears. What this movie cleverly does is doesn't use a lot of those jump scares. What it does, it builds up to a jump scare. It's a long tension to the scare. And that was really got me. As I was covering my ears waiting for a jump scare, I was like, okay, it should have happened by now. Can it just happen? I hate this. I feel dread. And I really like that, despite my feelings. And like there was very smooth transitions during the scary moments where you expect something to pop out. And it doesn't. But what it does is the camera focuses back on the scare, but it's done in silence. And that's what really got me. I was like, I hate that, but I secretly love it. And as for the score, it was done by Marco Beltrami. Sorry if I mispronounced that. And I've recognized his name from the first movie, Logan, Wolverine. I have to rewatch those movies now because when I was listening to the soundtrack for Quiet Place Part 2, of course, it matches the tone of the movie. It relies heavily on the strings and drums to give that sense of dread and fear and adrenaline that the characters are facing. It really goes well with the chase scenes, these scary scenes. It just really brings you in that mood of there's something going wrong or something is going to happen and you have to run. So overall, I really did enjoy A Quiet Place Part 2. I didn't expect to enjoy it much more than the first movie. I mean, maybe I'll revisit the first film and maybe my rating will change, but again, I'm remembering the sequel more than the first movie, which don't find myself saying a whole lot when it comes to movies and their sequels. And again, this is a movie theater only experience, unless you can somehow bring the lights down setup of a movie theater, because it has to bring that uncomfortable feeling of claustrophobia and fear that the movie brings on its own. I will rate this at a 90%. That will be a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I highly recommend this movie just because of the not only the concept, but how it was presented with the cinematography and the editing. I think there is a part 3 coming out. I don't know the full details. I don't even know if John Krasinski is directing again. And I've heard that there is a TV works coming. Honestly, I think that's great because the second movie did not reveal a whole lot about how this happened. If anything, it ended on a cliffhanger. So I'm all for expanding this universe into series. What did you guys think of A Quiet Place Part 2? Let me know in the comments. I'm hopefully going to do another review for another movie I watched. Otherwise, have a great day. I love you all. Bye. And I